Also, the Borough has been reducing its emissions, and we were the fourth greatest emission reductions in the UK. So that's good progress, but it still doesn't get us on the trajectory we need to be to get to net zero by 2030, which is our town's target as set out in the climate emergency strategy. This graph shows us a little bit about the cumulative uptake of measures that would be needed to be able to meet the 2050 challenge. And so if we transcribe that on 2030, we've obviously got a huge challenge on our hands. But you can see from this graph that there are a great deal of measures required, and the scale up from before the 2025 down here in 2023 up to 2050, which is where we need to be, is huge. The mountain to climb is large. In terms of the Reading statistics, the domestic emissions in Reading in 2005 represented 34% of our emissions, and whilst both gas and electric have been reducing over the 15 years since the government have been collecting data, the proportion of the emissions in the borough that is due to domestic emissions has now increased up to 44% because there's so much gas being used in domestic properties. And you'll see also the other one that's increasing is transport, which is because of the fossil fuels combusted in those. So you can see that between them, the two blue parts of the bar chart of the pie graph are the bits that are really using direct fossil fuels significantly, and those are becoming a larger and larger proportion of our emissions as the electricity grid is decarbonising. So if this is what a successful mix of measures would look like according to the Committee on Climate Change, and we can see on the left side some significant amount of carbon emissions down to space heating, and that's largely again to do with the fact that we've got all of those gas boilers in our housing stock, and as we go across, we start to improve our energy efficiency of our buildings. As we this is for newer homes, and then new homes with heat pumps into the future with very low energy loss, I should say, heat loss. Those are, the bars are significantly compressed. We're now down to a third of what we had originally. So that is a sort of a successful mix of measures as described by the Committee on Climate Change, and essentially it's all about insulating those properties. I do apologise for the man standing behind me who occasionally appears. I have a picture behind me that does that. We have a range of measures, but the energy efficiency is largely about the thermal envelope. So it's largely about how insulated that building is, and then it's about what we heat it with. So it's about insulating the building and then putting in heat pumps. Okay. So a little bit on EPCs, a bit difficult to show EPCs the way the data is presented, but essentially you can see from this graph, this is the amount of EPCs each year over the years, and you can see from that graph that the bulk of the EPCs in Reading are in the C's and D's, that are being registered each quarter. The latest quarter is shown here, so we've got 400 odd getting registered in the quarter as C's and D's, and much less in the A's and B's, and still some in all the way up to F and G. So it's a picture of I guess mediocrity in terms of the EPC renewals. We need to be doing better than C or better, really, more in the B type area for net zero. Okay, so a little bit about supply chain. Supply chain is obviously one of the key factors for success. Our success at getting local companies, or not even necessarily local companies, but companies in the UK PLC to supply into the sector and give us enough retrofit capacity has been quite limited. And whilst the government has thrown out some grants that Anita will tell you about later, we are struggling to find people to install. and this graph shows for sort of the amount of value and for the job creations what levels of increase we're seeing in the supply chain, and it's going up by about 7 to 10% or 7 to 13%, about 10% on average each year. But over the last 3 years, we are limited by the expansion of that supply chain, and so even at the quite low levels of retrofit that we're doing under current government grants, we're still struggling with that. So we need a long-term plan for retrofit, but we need to obviously try to maximise that, be smart about the way we develop and build our supply chains going forward. So that's a little bit about the context and the data associated with Reading and retrofit. As I said, put on by the Reading Climate Action Network. You can log on to, you can find out information on Reading Can and about the festival, and also do have a look at the other events that are going on over the next fortnight. So I would like to, at this point, I'll pass over to the next presenter, and I think Rich and Jamie, are you okay to go next?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's all, Ben. Is that?
Yes, thank you, Richard.
Well done. Good. We are on board. Excellent.
Great.
Ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome. My name is Richard Lewis. I'm joined by Jamie, and today we're going to talk about Winter Watch and keeping warm and healthy in your home, which does sound quite odd today on one of the hottest days of the year. Essentially, Winter Watch is a bespoke one-to-one session that we have with vulnerable households to help better understand how energy is consumed and practical ways to staying safe and warm during financial hardship. This talk provides a basic guidance for saving energy in the home for perhaps those who have never lived independently before, those who have recently returned from hospital, somebody of a vulnerable age, who just simply want some questions, got some answers to some questions. So the first Winter Watch energy tip is keeping your doors closed throughout your home reduces heat loss, allowing you to stay warmer for longer. Simply turning radiator valves down for rooms you don't use that often. Turning them off could increase the risk of damp forming. Set thermostats between 18 and 20 degrees. This means your boiler will only take action if the temperature drops below the set temperature. Good insulation, good keeping doors closed will help stable a safe and comfortable temperature throughout your home. Really think about where energy travels. Where does heat really travel, and reducing that heat loss. Think about the commonly household appliances that we use. Filling up kettles for the correct amount of water you actually need will make a huge saving on your energy bill. If you're on an economy 7, properties with nice storage heaters and electric immersion tanks, ensure that the boost switch on your hot water tank is switched off. This is using the expensive day rate to heat up your water tank. It's vital that we are saving energy, we are watching how much energy we're using, that we submit regular meter readings, ideally monthly, towards your energy provider. This can be done every month, and we can do it by text message, and you can do it online or just over the phone. Switching off your television standby could save you up to £30 a year. Reviewing your energy performance certificate, EPC. To see this, you can see it to see what sort of energy measures you can sort of save on. You can find this on the government website, find-energy-certificate. Washing. Add an extra spin cycle to get as much moisture out of your clothes as possible, using a washing line or drying in direct sunlight, and try and avoid those expensive tumble dryers. Bleed your radiators. The trapped air can make your radiators less efficient. Check that the entire radiator heats up. To bleed your radiators, you just need a radiator bleeding key, which costs about 99p, and you can find them at local DIY stores. Turn the valve towards you a few inches. You'll hear an air releasing from the radiator, then tighten as soon as the water appears. If you know somebody, or if you yourself are vulnerable, you've reached state pension age, or you're disabled, a long-term medical condition, recovering from an injury, have hearing or sight conditions, or pregnant or have children under the age of 5, you could be added onto the Priority Service Register. With this service, you can get advance notice on planned power cuts, identification and password schemes, help with prepayment meter access, for example, moving a meter if you can't safely top up, accessible information, for example, account information in Braille and large print. Explaining energy can be quite complex. So when we do our one-to-one visits with tenants, we provide a one-sheet guide on how to talk to your energy provider. What does your bill mean? Information on night storage heaters. What does that expensive economy 7 or boost section mean on your immersion tank? All that information is something that we can present to tenants, just making sure they understand. I'm now going to hand over to Jamie, who's going to talk about the new, cleaner, greener way of heating up our homes with an air source heat pump. Jamie, are you there at all?
Yes, hello. Can everyone hear me?
Perfect.
Good. Richard, I don't know if you just want to be my clicker for me.
Yeah, sure.
Whilst you've got the control of the screen. Hi everyone, I'm Jamie, so I'm also an energy support officer working for Reading Borough Council. I know Anita will cover a bit about the funding schemes in place to upgrade from a boiler to an air source heat pump, but I just want to go over what an air source heat pump actually is, the basics in operating them, and some other considerations around electricity use and heating your home more efficiently with these systems. So next slide, please. So what are they? So air source heat pumps, or air to water source, the more common system, more widely being rolled out at the moment. So they absorb air into a network of tubes from the outside air into the network of tubes, and these tubes are filled with a refrigerant gas. This cold air and gas passes into a compressor, and this high pressure causes a change in the gas temperature. This compressed gas then passes through a heat exchanger to create heated water, which that heated water is then pumped around rooms via radiators or underfloor heating. This heated water as well it's stored in a hot water cylinder. So it's used for hot taps and showers. And you do also get air-to-air source heat pumps, which consist of those same elements. So the compressor, the condenser, the expansion valve. However, it's not so much liquid involved. It's sort of hot air released through vents. So these aren't typically used as much because they can't really be used as a central heating system on top of heating water. So hence why the council has preferred air to water for their suitability to existing properties and older properties as well. Next slide, please. So just a bit about operating your air source heat pump. The main thing to consider with air source heat pumps is that they work best when there's a less of a difference between outside and inside temperatures. And that electricity is used when the outside circulating pump and the inside compressor are running. So what is the best weather for a heat pump? An air source heat pump, as I say, it works best when the weather is warmer, as that abundance of heat in the air can be absorbed and used to heat your home, and heating homes becomes more efficient in the British summertime. Now you probably think, well, it's least efficient when I need it most in the winter. The great majority of air source heat pumps are designed to work in freezing conditions, down to at least -10 degrees, with many able to convert heat to heat with outside temperatures as low as -25 degrees. So in sum, your air source heat pump, it should keep working fine in cold weather. It's just that a bit more efficient when that outside temperature is a bit warmer. Next slide. Yeah, no, this slide, keep there. So again, how do you operate it? So this is where your thermostat is your best friend, really. To use your thermostat to set a constant ambient temperature. So that's around 18 to 20 or 22 degrees. If the room temperature drops too low, then this can communicate with the machine, with the heat pump, to boost up and use unnecessary electricity as it tries to bring that heat sort of back to an equilibrium, back to an ambient temperature, which is much harder to do when the room temperature drops. So if you set your thermostat for longer, more constant periods of temperatures between 18 to 22, this will heat homes more slowly and allow that air source heat pump to run a bit more efficiently as well. Next slide, please. So remember, air source heat pumps, they do work best in an insulated home. So closing room doors more often will allow that heat to build up and be maintained. I think it's also crucial to note that turning off heating in specific rooms will create those cold spaces where they can draw heat away and make that heat pump a bit less efficient and driving the costs up. Next slide, please. So the machine itself, the external unit, should be clear of any obstacles. I'm not sure if people saw in the image a few slides ago, that was my air source heat pump covered by an umbrella stand, and even something like that, just blocking that airflow is something to consider. Snow and ice and cold temperatures, It is completely normal. It shouldn't affect the inner workings of air source heat pumps, but yeah, it's just something to consider. If there's any debris, leaves, you want that fan and those vents to be as clear as possible. Next slide, please. So just a bit more about the controls. It's important to check your pressure gauge on the hot water boiler, and make sure this is in between the pressure range of 1 to 2 bars. For the control pad and smart meter itself, if there's something critically wrong with the heat pump, this should tell you. So it is as important as anything else, as the pressure gauge. If you see warnings on the control screen, don't ignore them. Keep an occasional eye on them, on the fault log, and see if you have any reoccurring messages or anything that you don't recognize. It's important to ask questions. And sometimes as well, problems can be the central heating system rather than the heat pump itself. So despite air source heat pump checks by an engineer being a little bit less frequent than say a gas boiler check, it's better to have it done sooner rather than later. It will keep the running costs down. It will keep the running costs down. It will make things a little bit easier for you. Next slide, please. So some key points just based off that to remember. So air source heat pumps are highly efficient and quick in converting air to hot water for heating. They're lower maintenance, and in terms of low carbon, they're quite sustainable compared to gas. You can also make it easy to maintain a constant temperature in the house and make it cost efficient for you if you follow the steps that, say, Rich outlined before, having that awareness of finding a balance between heating and ventilating with the doors and windows. Next slide, please. And to consider as well, the water in hot water tanks can be cooler than when from a gas boiler, which tend to have higher outputs due to their size. They do take longer to heat up a property. That's the nature of an air source heat pump, especially when a house is really cold. It's not designed to heat a temperature beyond sort of ambient warmth, to say beyond 25 degrees. It's designed to heat up slower over longer periods, requiring that good wall insulation to prevent heat loss and keep the running costs lower. As Ben mentioned, it's that balance between a low carbon system and good ventilation and good insulation. And with this as well, leaving windows open can influence the efficiency of the heat pump due to that heat escaping. So last slide from me. So yeah, your electricity will seem higher than other energy systems as it is used to operate the air source heat pump itself, meaning your heating bill is included in your electricity bill. The typical air source heat pump, however, produces 3 units of heat for every 1 unit of energy. So that means you'll only need around 4,000 kilowatts of an hour of electricity to produce 12,000 kilowatts of heat for an average home over a year. So that's an efficiency rate of around 300% compared to gas. To get the most out of that heat pump and to reduce the amount of electricity required, again, keeping the property warm, heated for longer over continuous periods, not at 30 degrees, but between 18 to 20 to 22 during winter. That again prevents the system from having to heat up the property from cold. Okay, that is all from me.
That's us done, yeah. So
yeah.
if you've got any, if you want to make a referral, you can give us a call on 0118 937 3747, or simply email the Winterwatch team on winter.watch@reading.gov.uk.
Thank you, guys. Great to hear about what's happening and what advice you guys are giving out in the field and keeping people warm in their homes. Anita, you're going to take I think the last slot, unless anybody from DraughtBusters is here to talk about the DraughtBuster scheme.
Hi Ben, it's Paul Bailey. I'm here to speak on behalf of DraughtBusters.
Excellent, thank you, Paul. In which case, if I could put you on the last slot after Anita, then that would be great.
Sure, thanks.
Thanks a lot. Okay, over to you, Anita, if you're able to share.
Brilliant. Let me try and work out how to share my screen. Hang on. Let me know. Is that working?
Yep. That's it.
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Okay. So thanks, Ben and Richard and Jamie, for your presentations. Just to introduce myself, my name's Anita Purser, and I work at Reading Borough Council as a low carbon housing project manager. This afternoon, I just want to give you a really short presentation just to discuss a summary of what housing retrofit actually is, and to provide you with a list of the current energy funding that is available to you, I also wanted to provide you with some details on a new solar PV scheme that we have teamed up with the other councils in Berkshire to run, called Solar Together Berkshire Scheme. Okay, so retrofit is simply the process of making changes to existing buildings so that its energy consumption and carbon emissions are reduced. This is especially important at the moment where we're all looking at ways to reduce our electricity and energy bills. So there's two main approaches that you sometimes hear about when people refer to retrofit. They're fabric first and whole house. So fabric first. The image on this slide shows that a significant amount of heat is lost through a home's fabric. For example, its walls, roof, floor, and windows. The fabric first principle is to improve a building's fabric through additional insulation, new windows, and the reduction of drafts. This will result in less energy being required to heat your home. The preferred approach is to first improve the building fabric, as insulation has a relatively low cost, and then this will help reducing the heating demand of your home and should help reducing your heating bills. Once the heat loss of a property is reduced, it is recommended that you should then look at more efficient ways to heat your property, and also consider looking at the use of low carbon technologies such as ground source heat pumps or air source heat pumps to provide your heating and hot water. Another approach is called the whole house approach. This is where energy used by the entire house is considered. This includes the heat loss through the building fabric, but it also includes the energy used to provide heating, hot water, ventilation, and lighting. This whole house approach is governed by a standard called PAS 2035. And generally, any funding, which I'll talk about later on in the presentation, will require properties to follow this whole house approach. In a whole house approach, an assessment is normally carried out by a qualified professional who will visit your home and carry out a survey. A plan is then produced, which is usually split into phases. Each phase generally includes the estimate cost for the work that can be undertaken, the estimated energy savings for each of the measures, and the carbon reduction as well that can be made. Okay, so why is retrofit needed? There are several benefits which come from retrofitting your home. Retrofitting can help improve and reduce your energy bills. It can also help you feel warmer and more comfortable with an even temperature all year round, and also help to eliminate drafts. As Ben also mentioned, retrofit can also help reducing carbon emissions and will help Reading Borough Council reach its aim of becoming carbon neutral by 2030. Okay, so there are a number of home energy schemes available at the moment, some of which are managed by the council, others centrally by the government, and some in partnership with Ofgem. I'll do a quick summary about the current schemes that are available in the next few slides, but additional information on the schemes can be found on the Reading Borough Council website under Housing Improve Your Home, and I'm also able to answer questions, I guess, at the end of the presentation. So the first one I wanted to talk about quickly was the Energy Company Obligation Scheme. This energy company obligation is an obligation on energy suppliers to deliver energy efficient and heating measures to homes of low income residents living in the least energy efficient homes. This scheme is managed by Ofgem. The improvements for the scheme include improvements on insulation, draft proofing, improved heating controls, and also the installation on first-time central heating systems. You may be eligible for the scheme if you receive certain mean tested benefits. You own your own property, or you're a landlord, or you're in a property. Your property is also classed as energy inefficient. To apply for the scheme, you can apply through your energy company, and another eco supplier, or by contacting a Trustmark registered tradesperson. The next one, going on about what Jamie was talking about with air source heat pumps, is the boiler upgrade scheme. So homeowners can apply for a grant to cover part of the cost of replacing a fossil fuel heating system, i.e. like a gas boiler, with an air source or ground source heat pump or a biomass boiler as part of the government's boiler upgrade scheme. So with this one, you might be eligible if you own your own property, you're planning to install or already have installed an air source, ground source heat pump or a biomass boiler on or after April 2022, and you're replacing a fossil fuel heating system such as oil, gas or electric. So the grant covers £5,000 off the cost of installation of an air source heat pump or biomass boiler, or £6,000 off the cost of a ground source heat pump. The way that this scheme works is that you'd find an accredited installer, and the installer will apply for Ofgem on your behalf for this grant. In terms of a air source heat pump, or ground source heat pump, we always advise that you take professional advice of whether it's suitable of installing an air source heat pump in your property, and you should definitely look at doing the fabric first principle first. The next one is the Green Deal. So this is a loan scheme which allows you to spread the cost of improvements over between 10 and 25 years. The Green Deal loan differs from standard loans because the repayments are added to your electricity bill. So the improvements covered by the scheme include insulation, draft proofing, double glazing and renewable energy such as solar panels or heat pumps. Any house with an electricity meter can apply for this, and you can apply for the scheme through the Green Deal approved provider. And again, more information is found on the Reading Borough Council website about this scheme. Okay, so the next thing I'd like to talk about is a new scheme that we've launched this week with all the other Berkshire councils called Solar Together. So this is a group buying solar PV scheme, which we are running in partnership with Solar Together to help make the process of buying and installing solar panels easier for the residents in Reading, and also teaming up with other homeowners in Berkshire should allow residents to be able to buy the PV panels at a more competitive price. Okay, so what is solar PV? Solar electricity panels, also known as photovoltaics, capture the sun's energy and convert it into electricity that can be used in your home. Okay, so how the scheme works. So this is a Berkshire scheme, so it's running across all the local authorities and councils in Berkshire at the same time. So the first process is to register your interest. So you can register your interest for free online or over a phone number, which we'll provide later, and there's no obligation for you to sign up for it. At the end of this process, a reverse auction will be held where pre-vetted solar installers will submit bids to the work. The idea is the more people that register, the better the deal should be for each household. The installer with the most competitive packages will win the auction. After this phase, you'll get a personal recommendation, which will be emailed across to you, which will tell you information about the system, including the cost and the size of your system. You then have the ability to decide whether you want to accept the recommendation or not. There's no obligation to continue at this point, and they'll let you know how long you have to accept it. And then if you decide to go ahead, you accept the installation, and the willing installer will contact you for a survey of your roof and put in an installation date. So why have we set up Solar Together, and why, what are the benefits of joining it? So we feel like it's easier to be part of a group scheme, and hopefully as a group scheme, the more people we can sign up, we can get a more competitive offer for it. Windsor and Maidenhead Council ran it last year as part of a Buckingham scheme, and they've had really positive feedbacks about it from their residents. So we've decided with Berkshire to link up with all the other councils this year to run our own one. You can also save money on your electricity bills with your solar panels installed. Solar panels are a renewable energy, so it's clean and an unlimited source of energy, and it will also help reduce your CO2 emissions, but also again to help Council and Reading achieve its 2030 aim to be carbon neutral. Okay, so the Solar Together scheme, there's more information about it again on the Reading Borough Council website, or you can apply directly with Solar Together at www.solartogether.co.uk Reading, and there's phone numbers and email addresses for them. And then just to kind of finish off, in addition to the current schemes, also at the council, we're planning to launch and run a home upgrade scheme at the end of this year, which will provide energy efficiency improvements to low-income residents living in inefficient homes, which are not heated by gas. We're also looking at ways to set up the Eco4 Flex scheme, which has the possibility to extend the eligibility requirements of the current Eco4 scheme to additional residents. And the government is also in the process of setting up a new scheme called the Great British Insulation Scheme, which will be administered by Ofgem. This scheme is still in consultation, but we're expecting it hopefully to start at the end of this year. So if you yourself or another resident would like any more information about energy funding, it's all listed on the Reading Borough Council website. I also work really closely with the Winter Watch team, and you are also kind of able to call them to get advice on energy improvements for your home. In addition to this, we've got our own email address, which is energyfunding@reading.gov.uk, and email us with your questions and we'll get back and help you ASAP. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Anita. Some really good and clear advice there for everybody. I would say that it's been obviously quite a Reading Borough Council centric discussion so far. So I'm now going to hand over to Paul, who's joining us from DraughtBusters, which is a community initiative. So it'd be good to hear what the volunteers at DraughtBusters have been up to. So welcome, Paul. If you could put your camera on for us, and we could see you, and you have a presentation. Fantastic.
I do. I'm struggling a bit with the technology, but I think I'm nearly there.
You and me both.
Can you see my screen?
We can. I think if you start your slide show, we'll be able to see the whole slide as well.
Right. So is that better?
Yep.
Great. Thank you.
Good. Okay. Thanks, Ben. Yeah, I'm Paul Bailey. I'm here to tell you what we in Reading DraughtBusters are doing to help reduce energy consumption in Reading homes. So in terms of what can have the biggest impact in your homes on energy reduction against the cost of those items, I've put a list here. So draft proofing is relatively cheap, but also has a big impact. Insulation, again, big impact, a bit more expensive. And as you see, as you go down the list, more expensive items, but they all have a good impact. Insulation, new boilers, new windows are very good, but very expensive. And how much could you save by draft proofing? On average, an average house will save about £300 a year through good draft proofing. But that will also make the homes more comfortable at lower temperatures. So potentially you might be able to turn down thermostats, which could save another £60 a year. Where to look for drafts in your home? Drafts happen in any unwanted gaps to the outside and uncovered openings. Examples of common sources of drafts are windows and surrounds, doors, including the frames, gaps between thresholds, keyholes, letterboxes, loft hatches, electrical fittings on walls where there's holes again to the outside. Suspended floorboards, which is particularly in old houses where there's an intended draft running under the house, but if there's gaps between floorboards, that draft can come up into the house. Pipework, ceiling to wall joints. So just a few slides to show you some of the issues that we found. Here is a door, but there's a gap between the door frame and the wall where we found drafts coming through. In the window board, so it was new windows were put in, but there's a gap between under the window board, again letting drafts through. Here you'll see where the arrow points, there's a big gap where it looks like a sort of a toilet pipe or whatever waste pipe was left open. Gaps between floorboards, as I say, particularly a problem where you've got an old floating floor. Loft hatches, draft strips can be used to prevent drafts around the board, the loft hatch. And you can also put insulation on the trap itself to further reduce energy loss. And here it's a bit difficult to see, but there's what looks like a line of dust on the frame of this window, and that's dust that's been blown through the draft through the side of the window. And again, yeah, it's a sign, any sign that drafts are coming through. Here we see the seal on the window has come detached. So if it's not in the right place, drafts are going to come through. And a few cheap materials can make a big difference. I mean, draft proofing materials are generally quite cheap. And here we've put in an insulation, a draft proofing material between the floorboards to keep out that underfloor draft. Letter plates, the flap or brush seal again stops the draft coming through letter boxes. And here's just a few examples of some of the things that we found. Here you can see under the door there's a big gap. It's almost as big as the letterbox, I think. Here it's a big hole in the floor where drafts would come up through. Not immediately obvious. It was under the sink, but would let a lot of air through. So insulation, it's, as I say, it's a lot more costly, but it's important to get a house properly insulated and saves a lot of money in the longer term. DraughtBusters clients come from a number of sources. We've got the Reading Borough Council Winter Watch, local debt advice services, GP and social workers, Communicare, churches. Existing clients have referred friends and family on. Some green groups we're linked to, and increasingly they're coming from our website. 250 homes have been worked on by us. Cheapest upgrade was £1.50, and potentially, if they followed the advice given, saving of £120 pounds a year, we estimate. Biggest savings we think could have been about £600 for a front door we worked on. Not a single loft trap was insulated during our first season that we found, and over 1,000 households have been helped. Average cost was about £25. So in summary, our key recommendations for saving energy: keep windows and doors closed, draft proof, insulate, turn the thermostat down, fit programmable room stats, and this is our website for more information. And thanks for listening.
Thank you, Paul. Fantastic to hear of all the great work that you are all doing, and it's very much appreciated the efforts that you all personally put into the scheme. I know you've achieved some great numbers, so that's a great indication of helping people practically to save energy in the borough, which is probably part of the graphs I showed at the beginning was probably down to your work. So thanks again. Okay, so that concludes our presentations. So if I could just ask for the presenters to put their cameras on, and if you're not presenting today, if you could turn your camera off, that'd be great. And if and what we'll do is, if people have got a question, then if you'd raise your hand, and we'll go through them in order. But for the starting off, people have asked some questions in the chat, and so questions that haven't been asked in the chat, starting off with a question from Julian: what approach is Reading Borough Council taking to help people get whole house assessments? I don't know, would Richard, would you like to take that one first, and then you
I guess it really depends on their income. If they're on low income, then we can go out there and we can have a look to see what needs to be done. If they've already got the correct level of insulation, then we wouldn't do loft insulation. But again, we're relying on surveys to be carried out on that property to see what exactly needs to be done and what measures can be done to help improve the energy efficiency levels.
Thank you. So that's Winter Watch, and then I know there are some assessment requirements within some of the funded programs. So Anita, you might be able to say a word or two about those as well.
Yes, so generally in terms of the government funding, they are required to do a whole house assessment. As Richard kind of mentioned, they are based on income threshold, especially for eco schemes. So you'd have to be reliant on falling into having an income of less than £31,000 per annum, or on being on certain mean tested benefits. And then to go down the route of getting the grant funding for it, then you'd have to apply for the funding, and then a whole house assessment would be carried out for free as part of that grant funding. In terms of, I guess, other residents who are interested for it, you can contact accredited professionals for it. They're called retrofit coordinators. Unfortunately, they are quite expensive to do. They can cost about £200 to £300. They're kind of the next level on for an EPC. But depending on what measures you want to take from them, you could save that back on, your installation of whatever the recommendations come for it. So it was your loft insulation or your windows or upgrading your heating controls. You might be able to save that cost back relatively quickly for it.
Yeah, I think it seems like a good idea to get a really good assessment done when you're thinking about spending quite a bit of money on your home, and knowing that these days with energy costs where they are, you will get that money back for your investment. So it's a good place to start, I think, isn't it? Whole house assessment. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for your question, Julian. Michael asks, concerning Solar Together Berkshire, does it include home batteries too, including the case of a house already having previously installed solar panels? So could you just get batteries on it?
You can just get batteries on it. So there's an option at the start whether you're just interested in PV, batteries, or only batteries. So there is an option for that.
Great, that's a nice quick answer on that one, Anita. Thank you. John, hello John, good to hear from you. Please could someone say a little bit about the good work RBC is doing retrofitting its own residential properties? I'll say a little bit about it, largely because otherwise Anita's going to be answering everything. But Anita knows a lot more detail about the specific schemes. But Reading has been busy doing on its own properties some whole house retrofit work, particularly around Norcott. We've done some work there, and bringing properties up to a much more energy efficient standard, and also putting some heat pumps in. So I think there's been further programs of work done more recently. I think Anita, you've been on site visiting some projects recently where there's a whole house retrofitting being done. So I don't know whether you want to add anything to that. But.
Yes, so as Ben said, we've got kind of projects running at the moment where we've identified kind of areas of housing in Reading where we've got whole house retrofit projects going. We're also going back through our EPC data and going back through our lowest performing homes and doing whole house assessments on those, and installing kind of fabric first measures initially to bring the EPCs up for that. And then I guess I've also been to visit quite a few new build sites. I know it's not retrofit, but they're all being built to kind of passive house standards as well. Just to keep in mind, especially I guess for social tenants, to bring the energy bills kind of as low as we possibly can for them.
Thank you. I think that's passive house principles rather than isn't it? Just before anyone gets excited about having some passive houses in town, because I know we've been on the lookout for a true passive house for quite a long time. But yes, John again asked an issue with retrofit advice. People finding people that we can trust and trustworthy installers. Is there a shortage of skilled companies, and what can we do about it? I think this relates to the point that I was making about the supply chain, and I think it's safe to say, is it not, Anita, that we're struggling to find installers. It's a challenge in terms of our own procurement, but even more so for the grant schemes. So where we're trying to bring in installers who can manage a range of projects for us on the grant delivery side, that is extremely challenging. And is being faced across the country, and so different areas are competing for different installers' attention, and it's becoming quite a bottleneck in the whole retrofit challenge, I think. Would it be fair to say? Anybody else wants to come in on that?
That's true. One of the things I guess just to mention is so the government's put in a kind of scheme called Trustmark. So to get, say, eco funding, you have to go with a Trustmark registered installer. So I guess if you are starting to look for an installer who I guess has a level of trustworthy to them, it might be start looking on the Trustmark website and kind of you can put in your postcode there, and it'll give you your list of local accredited kind of Trustmark installers.
Okay, thank you. And Linda, thank you for your comment about the disconnection charge. Always the way we find there are some further implications about grants that we never quite clocked in the first instance. So I don't have any hands up yet, but I don't know if anybody has a question, then do raise your hand and we can hopefully answer it. I reckon somebody out there must have been thinking about asking a question. Now's your moment. Okay.
Rich, it's just quickly, I think it's worth, with Linda's comment there, just mentioning the project that started next week with the RBC tenants.
Yeah, I think it was quoted as £1,000. Is that right? Did I read that correctly? We've been taking out some gas meters because we've been installing air source heat pumps into properties. I know that it can be quite challenging at times to get through to energy providers to arrange this. I've done a couple. I've done a couple of speaking to energy providers to have the gas meter removed. I've never been quoted anywhere near £1,000. I think the highest I've been quoted is about 250. So I do question I don't know exactly what has been quoted, what exactly that entails, but £1,000 does seem like a lot.
So who
yeah,
have
it's something that we're involved with.
To Rich about disconnection, because
It's your energy provider. They own the meter, and they will then book in with the gas engineers to have it disconnected, get it removed, so you're not paying that standing charge. There's been a couple that I've spoken to that have done it free of charge. There's a few out there that will charge, and they usually add it to your bill, to your electric bill, and you pay it off in your next bill that comes through. But yeah, I'd be keen to talk to you about that, Linda, give you some advice outside of this meeting.
Great, thanks, Rich. So Linda, get in touch with Richard and you can unpack that one a little bit more as to how to get that price down a bit. So unless there are any other questions, I think probably we'll be wrapping up. But I just wanted to say thanks to the speakers today for they've all got busy day jobs and have taken the time and effort to put presentations together for us today. So thank you very much for that. And I wanted to also just sort of reflect in closing comments on the fact that I think it's fair to say that retrofit is a huge challenge, and getting started with the scale of retrofit that we need is hugely challenging, not least because some of the funding schemes that we've had have been very targeted with quite a lot of strings attached, and not also allowed us to take the time to develop the supply chains that we need to deliver at the scale that we need to deliver. A slightly flip side is that the energy prices are increasing so significantly that it makes retrofit even more of a no-brainer than it was before. We needed to act before for climate change and for people's own comfort in their homes and for their own financial sustainability as well. So, but that's even more the case now. So we're really seeing an increase in those technologies starting to come forward. Heat pumps are starting to get installed where previously people were reticent to do so. Those heat pumps are switching from gas to electricity, and electricity is still significantly more expensive than gas per unit, but of course heat pumps are 3 or 4 times more efficient than a gas boiler. So it's well worth considering that, and also considering that in the future, if you've switched to an electrified source of heat, your carbon footprint will be going down every year as the country decarbonises its energy supply. So if, on the other hand, you stay on gas, that's pretty much going to stay where it is until and if we get hydrogen. But I think safe to say that that's a long way off. So for our 2030 ambitions in Reading, I really heartily recommend electrifying heat. But first of all, do your fabric. So get your fabric done, and as Paul pointed out, there are lots of very low cost energy efficiency measures you can take just by having a good look around your house, and you've got plenty of people around that can help. So I hope today's given everyone a sense of the support that's out there, and hopefully we can get going and start to scale up our retrofit ambitions towards 2030 now, and get some significant progress. So thank you, everyone. And unless there's any last minute hands coming up, then I will close a little early at just after 6. Okay, there'll be the record.